Welcome to the Fusion Power Hour, real health talk. The Fusion Power Hour is presented by Fusion Ion fans. Fusion Ions, live your best. Go to fusionions.com for more information. And now, here are the hosts of the Fusion Power Hour, Matt Ryncarz and Donald Barrett.
All right, and welcome to Fusion Power Hour on this beautiful Saturday morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Donald. Donald, how are you doing today?
I'm terrific, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I know that what we talked about over the past week is we really want to start delivering some up-to-date health headlines, right? So kind of rip from the headlines as far as health news, because there's lots of news that floats around that people don't have a chance to see and read. And it'd be kind of a fun way to start our show off with some of those headlines and go over some of the current news. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. And people have to understand that there's new and breaking news coming out daily, almost hourly, on health and nutrition. And if you're sick or if you just want to stay healthy, you know, there's lots of breaking information that you should really keep up to speed on.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes it's even tough to really keep up with because, of course, you know, we have our Unspoken Cures newsletter, which you can go to fusionpowerhour.com and sign up for. And we offer free daily tips, and we're constantly scouring the web, scouring the news, finding the most beneficial natural health news out there. But it comes at you so fast that sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. So,
and what's nice about the Fusion Power Hour is each and every week people can tune into our show 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings on Arena Sports Network, and we can go through the headlines and give them all the up-to-date information. I mean, this is what we do for a living, so let us weekly deliver that information to you and give you that up-to-date knowledge.
Well, you know, let's go ahead and jump into some of the headlines that are kind of trending this week. Here's one that's scary. Shampoo. A study's come out that's showing that shampoo, because of the chemicals in shampoo, can be harmful for your health. Even linked to cancer. That's how scary it is.
What chemicals are they talking about in that article, Matt?
Well, you have what are called they're sulfates. So you have to really look at the makeup of the shampoo that you're buying. So all the shampoos that you buy have ingredients that are listed. So when you pick up a bottle of shampoo, here's what you should do. Go ahead and look at the label and write these words down. Make sure that it does not have, and I know I'm going to butcher it because you know how I am with pronouncing things, but propylene glycol, sodium sulfate, or sodium lauryl sulfate.
Now, that's salt.
Yeah, sodium lauryl sulfate is in the salt family. Yep. Then you have sodium laureth sulfate, DEA. Now, we're not talking about the agency, right? We're talking about an ingredient. So DEA-TEA, and then PEG. These are all chemicals that evidently are used in shampoos you need to stay away from.
And what does the article say? Does it increased risk in cancer?
Yeah, so the article basically goes over the fact that each one of these chemicals has its own risk, but specifically sodium lauryl sulfate has a tendency, or reports show, that it increases the risk of cancer and reproductive problems. So obviously not things you want.
I mean, how many of the shampoos on the market have these ingredients in them? Is it the majority?
It's the majority, and it's the big companies that are looking to make their products at cheaper prices. So again, it's linked back to money. However, with that said, there are several companies nowadays that are producing chemical-free, sulfate-free shampoos. So the key is knowing that it's a problem, because that's the problem, is most people don't know that this is an issue because they're upset that this type of product is even available that can harm them. I mean, you think that, hey, I go into my local store, I buy shampoo, a big company that I trust is not going to sell me something that can give me cancer. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. So now that you're educated, now that you know, now you can look at the label and make sure that those ingredients are not in your shampoo. But I thought it was absolutely terrifying.
You know, our friends over at Ryncarz have that commercial out on that shampoo. When is it? Which is supposed to be an all-natural, more organic type of shampoo.
Exactly.
And I know there's a lot of other choices on the market out there, and we can put those on our website as well, fusionpowerhour.com. So if someone does want more information, or maybe you're looking for a better choice out there, we'll give you some recommendations right on the website.
Because this is a good lesson for any product you buy. You should look at the ingredients and make sure there aren't any chemicals inside of the products that you're using on your skin. I've heard a major health expert one time say if you put it on you don't put anything on your skin that you cannot put in your mouth. And if there's an ingredient,
how about this? Don't put anything on your skin that you cannot pronounce.
That was the second. That was my second tip.
Okay.
And for guys like us, there's lots of words that we can't pronounce, right? So, but so that's just it's good advice to live by. The second article that I came across, which was pretty scary and shocking. But yet we've heard all the horror stories with the FDA, our friends at the FDA. But here's what this says. This is a headline, okay? It says, pharmaceutical company asks FDA to withdraw approval for its own drugs since agency is too corrupt to protect public safety on its own.
What? Say that one again.
Okay. It says, pharmaceutical company asks FDA to withdraw approval. So take away approval for its own drugs, its own product, since agency is too corrupt to protect public safety on its own. So this company realized that some of the products it was selling, in fact, were not safe. And instead of relying on the FDA to pull them off the market or outlaw them, they had to coerce the FDA to do it because they know the FDA won't do it on their own. And that, to me, is terrifying.
No. I heard they have a rubber stamp down there. You pay enough money, they stamp it. FDA approved. And it's sad because we talk about it so much on our show, Matt, that people look at the FDA as an authority figure. And I remember the quote from Herbert Lay, who was a former FDA commissioner. He said, what the FDA is doing and what the public thinks the FDA is doing is like night and day. I mean, it's scary because the FDA is who we rely upon them as a federal agency to protect us. And they go through trials, and companies have to spend upwards to $800 million to get drugs approved by the FDA. The sad thing is, why is it every year that we hear about drugs being pulled off the market that were already FDA approved? Why are companies spending all this money, and why is the FDA spending years to approve drugs that may have to be pulled off the market in the future? We remember Vioxx, we remember Fen-Phen, we remember all those drugs that were initially FDA approved, then pulled off the market. So I get really skeptical when someone says it's an FDA approved drug. That's when my antenna goes up, so to speak.
Sure. I mean, and later on in the show, we're actually going to talk about a company that our show is about diabetes today, and we're going to talk about a company that was selling an FDA approved drug, a big company that this drug killed 6,000 people and put 30,000 in the hospital. That was an FDA approved drug from a large, reputable trusted, and you can't see me, but I put trusted in quotes. Listeners at home can't see me, obviously, but that's scary. And we're not making this stuff up. This stuff's reported. We're just reading the headlines. We're just here bringing the news to you.
Getting back to the philosophy of our show and the philosophy that we like to get out there is, most people would rather give their body something natural first before relying on drugs and surgery. Why not give your body its best chance to heal itself naturally first? And there are so many natural methods out there that can cure and prevent many of the chronic diseases out there.
Absolutely. And, we have a fantastic show lined up today. It's about diabetes. Diabetes affects upwards of 25 million people in our country. Over 90 million are pre-diabetic. So
every 17 seconds, somebody is dying of diabetes.
So if you have diabetes, if you think you have diabetes, if you think you know someone who has diabetes, you need to stay tuned for this next hour, because we're going to dive into it, and we're going to give you some natural solutions. We're going to tell you some things to stay away from, and it's going to be truly a very, very intriguing hour. So stay tuned, and we'll be back right after these messages from our sponsors.
You do a lot of thinking on a bike about your life, family, your dreams. One of my dreams came to me on a bike, to open up my own shop. So what happens when you complete a dream? Well, you just start thinking of the next.
Visit DrastichAgency.com or call 219-945-3040 and ask Joel Drastich how you can get all of your insurance under one roof.
All right, the Fusion Power Hour is back. I'm Matt Ryncarz.
And I'm Donald Barrett.
And, we would like to go ahead and touch on something that's popped up in the news recently. And I think, Donald, you actually sent me this article originally. And it's pretty surprising. It was Tom Hanks on the David Letterman show, right? Tom Hanks is, you said, Donald, he's 57 years old?
Yeah, he's now 57 years old, yeah.
And he recently announced that he has type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's not alone. I mean, it's a national epidemic. Absolutely. And there's other movie stars that have it. I mean, Halle Berry, Paula Deen, Patti LaBelle, Drew Carey. I mean, the list really goes on and on. So it doesn't just affect, the Hollywood elite. It's affecting everyday Americans. I read a statistic online. It said 1 in 3 Americans may develop diabetes by 2050 if something isn't done to reverse the trend. And that was based on a government statistic. And that's scary. 1 in 3 people.
Yeah, that's horrifying. And as I read the article that you sent me, something kind of rang very clear to me, and that is a parallel that we can draw between Tom Hanks and his story and the American public. And essentially what he said is that he feels he was genetically predisposed to diabetes, which many of us are, millions of us are.
Sure, he must have had it in his family. Maybe his mother or father had diabetes.
And I know I'm in that boat. A lot of my family has diabetes. It's one of the reasons that it's one of the reasons I lost a lot of weight in the first place. It's one of the reasons that I'm so critical over my own health, and one of the main drivers of me loving to do this show is to kind of get the information out there. But he went on to say that his roles, and we all remember his Academy Award-winning roles like Castaway, where he had to gain a lot of weight and then lose a lot of weight. Gain a lot of weight, lose a lot of weight. He had to do that in several of his roles if you think back across his career. And he, living that sort of lifestyle is kind of what he attributes his type 2 diabetes to. But when you think about it, many of us are doing the same thing, not necessarily having to have a big movie role, but we're gaining weight and losing weight, gaining weight and losing weight. And before I figured out what turned out to be my key or my cure for weight loss, I spent a lot of time doing exactly the same thing. So I understand where he's at. and I understand the metabolic derangement that creates, and the issue with sugar that's going to create as far as gaining weight and losing weight over and over again. And you just have to wonder how many millions of people are doing exactly the same thing on a daily basis and drastically raising the risk factors for diabetes moving forward. And I know, Donald, you told me that he had something that was you said he's always had high blood pressure? Is that what you read?
Well, yeah. Like I said, he's 57 years old now. But since he was 36 years old, he's been battling high blood pressure or hypertension. And, I think that's a telltale sign that he was a pre-diabetic, just like so many Americans out there. I mean, 26 million adults and children have diabetes in this country, but almost 80 million have pre-diabetes, meaning they're at risk for developing the disease. So if someone is in a pre-diabetic situation, they can do things naturally with exercise and diet to turn their fate around.
I could not agree more. And an article that I read today actually had to do with hidden sugar that's in a lot of our children's cereals. So you turn on the TV, you are inundated with cereal commercials telling you how healthy it is to start your kid off with cereal, feed him cereal, get him going with cereal. In reality, most of the most popular cereals on the market have above, get this, 35% sugar. So for every 100 grams of cereal, 35 grams is sugar. So now we wonder why our kids go through attention crashes. So they're all hyper in the morning, and then by 10 o'clock in the middle of school, they can't focus on anything, and they're tired. Well, their blood sugar is going crazy. It's like a giant roller coaster. They have this huge spike because they're eating essentially a candy bar for their quote unquote healthy breakfast, and then they plummet. So children.
Not only that, Matt, but they're damaging their immune system. Every time you ingest sugar, your immune system gets compromised. So you give your child cereal before they go out the door, and then they come home with the flu. And you're like, well, I don't know why. Well, you're sending them out the door where he's compromised or she's compromised, and she's more susceptible to getting the cold or a flu.
And the problem is that the American public looks at the advertisements they're put in front of them as gospel. So they look at these companies telling them that their breakfast choice is the healthiest, or, how many times have we seen, the Jimmy Dean commercials with their breakfast sandwiches and, waking up to a good breakfast. And, of course, that's all with processed and preservatives and
a nice processed sausage and processed egg.
Yeah. I mean, why don't you just, have chemicals, just go ahead and drink chemicals for breakfast. And that's basically the same thing.
Me and Matt, we talked about this. Most Americans are digging their own grave with their own knife and fork. And the standard American diet, which acronym is SAD, is you wake up, you have a donut, a coffee, and a cigarette, and you go to work.
Yeah, it's sad and it's scary. And, and it brings me back to Tom Hanks. When you're dealing with A-list celebrities, they have nutritionists, they have personal trainers, they have all these resources that as a group, most Americans don't have. So it's scary when people that have that kind of resource are still being given bad information, or don't have the ability to keep themselves from getting this horrible disease, which is diabetes. The bright note, and we've touched on this before, is the fact that it is 100% curable. So type 2 diabetes is something that you can cure, and there are natural ways to do so.
And I hope that's what Tom Hanks does. Unfortunately, Matt, I believe that the pharmaceutical companies are going to get a hold of Tom Hanks and have him promote some pharmaceutical drug that has deleterious side effects and instead of doing something natural. Because let's face it, as we talk about on this show every week, the pharmaceutical companies have the wherewithal to hire someone like Tom Hanks to promote their drug, much like they do with the arthritis product with the golfer.
Phil Mickelson. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Same scenario.
So I'm going to make that prediction on our show today that in the next few months or the next year, we're going to have Tom Hanks on a commercial promoting a drug for diabetes.
Well, you know what? I can't argue with that prediction. I think you're probably absolutely right. We're obviously hoping it goes another way and he becomes a spokesperson for natural cures, but that's probably not in the cards. We could say that probably pretty confidently.
And the reason why is what? Follow the money.
Follow the money.
The money trail, right? Because they have the money to pay him to say, hey, promote this drug.
You're absolutely right. Well, Donald, we're going to have to break shortly to hear a word from our sponsors. But coming up, you'll be able to hear more about this diabetes epidemic and what you can do to cure it naturally right after these messages from our sponsors. This has been Fusion Power Hour only on the Arena Sports Network.
What if you could have the energy, stamina, mental focus, balance, and flexibility of a 21-year-old at ages 40, 50, 60, even older? Introducing the world of negative ions, backed by 50 years of clinical research and a Nobel Prize. You probably have heard about negative ion machines that help to keep the air in your home free of viruses and other pathogens. Now, have the same rejuvenating properties in a simple wristband called the Fusion Ions Band. Instantly, it bathes your body with wave after wave of negatively charged ions that help to promote youth, energy, balance, flexibility, and prime of life health. Try wearing it risk-free for 30 days and see for yourself that Fusion Ions Bands are the most powerful negative ion bands on the market today.
All right, we have a fantastic show today about the diabetes epidemic. Donald, obviously, this is something that you and I have wanted to talk about for a while now, and there's lots of startling facts about diabetes, and I think we should go ahead and just jump right into it.
Right, Matt. I mean, we were talking about this before the show. Almost 30 million American children and adults in the United States, have diabetes, and 50% of the people out there don't even know that they have it. So we're going to be talking about diabetes this half an hour, but we're also going to be talking about pre-diabetes, because leading up to where they're diagnosed with diabetes, most of the time they've been pre-diabetic for years before that. And are there things that they can do when they're pre-diabetic to prevent getting that diagnosis? And we're going to be talking more about that this half an hour. So it's an exciting show we have on tap.
It is, and I think it's really important for us to explain how big of a problem this really is, not only in the United States but throughout the world. So you hit on it. About 30 million people have it. 50% of those do not even know they have it. 90 million are pre-diabetic. And then we look at worldwide, 300 million people throughout the world have diabetes.
One of the things, Matt, is they used to call it adult onset diabetes because people used to get it in their 30s and 40s and 50s. But now more kids are getting it than ever before. They don't even call it adult onset diabetes anymore.
No, they don't. And the one thing I want to clarify is when people talk about diabetes, you have type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is a genetic issue, meaning you're born with insulin resistance. That's only 5% of the diabetic population. Only 5% has type 1. Okay, a type 1 diabetic has to seek medical attention. There's not much they can do to change what essentially they were born with. However, 95% that are type 2 have caused the issue through nutrition and through their possibly lack of activity. We'll get to what actually causes diabetes as we go on. But it's an interesting point about the children, because from 1990 on, in 1990, this problem didn't even exist It wasn't even on a radar of anyone, meaning children were not getting diabetes. And now, like you said, it's a major problem. New York City actually posted a report. It was in the New York Post where they called the city itself had a diabetes epidemic from the number of people that were affected and dying in New York City due to diabetes. And that led me to begin to look at the stats, because I didn't realize how big of a killer diabetes actually was. And it is the 7th leading killer in the United States. There are more people that die from diabetes every year than breast cancer and AIDS combined. It is the leading cause of heart disease, stroke, kidney failure, and limb amputations. So we're talking about a major problem that needs to be dealt with.
Matt, what's the best way you can explain diabetes?
So the best way I can explain it is we have to look at our body, okay? So when we consume a carbohydrate, our body sends what's called an insulin response, meaning insulin is secreted into our bloodstream. That signals cells, muscle, fat, and fat cells to mobilize what are called T-glutes. The T-glutes are massive sponges, if you will, that actually soak up the blood sugar. In a normal, functioning, healthy, non-diabetic person, those T-glutes come up and they soak up the blood sugar that's flowing through your body. If you're diabetic, you lose the insulin response, meaning you lose the ability to soak up that blood sugar and it free flows throughout your body, creating a variety of health issues. So the way people get diabetes, specifically type 2, is overuse of that insulin response. So you and I were talking before the show, and I said it's kind of like when you wear out your brake pads on your car. If you overuse something over and over and over, your body gets used to it. And that's what happens with our insulin response. We are so addicted to sugar as a nation, so addicted to carbohydrates, that people that become type 2 diabetic have overused their insulin response to the point where it no longer works.
You mean maybe they're getting too much sugar in their diet?
Too much sugar, and then carbohydrates, which then turns into sugar in their diet. So they're having to use their insulin response over and over and over again, and they wear it out to where it no longer becomes responsive. Thus, they end up with diabetes. So that's why being overweight is the number one risk factor, as well as you have to look at your family history. So if your family history has diabetics throughout your gene pool, then you need to be super sensitive of those risk factors that will cause diabetes.
Now, when you talk about overweight, you're saying maybe over 200 pounds is you have a risk factor for diabetes. I guess that would depend on your height.
Yeah, it's going to depend on your height, your gender, and obviously muscle tone. Most people out there, without going by stats from a book, will know if they're overweight or not. But any sort of excess fat, if you're holding excess body fat,
especially around the belly,
correct. That is what they call the deadly fat, and it's deadly because of the diabetic conditions it can create. But
what are some signs that somebody may be pre-diabetic, Matt?
You have fatigue, you have chronic infection, you have slow healing. So if you were to get a cut and you notice that it just doesn't heal correctly, many people report numbness all throughout their limbs. They have to go to the bathroom constantly. So frequent urination. These are all signs that you could potentially have a problem. And the reason why being overweight is such a common risk factor is because if you're overweight, you're most likely not eating food. You're eating a high carbohydrate diet, which is the reason people become type 2 diabetic. So it all corresponds.
So we'll talk I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we'll talk more about these warning signs when we get back from our break.
Coming up, warning signs for diabetes and how you can prevent diabetes moving forward, as well as why the food industry and big pharma want to keep you fat. All this and more on Fusion Power Hour, only on the Arena Sports Network. All right, and we are back. In this segment, we're going to address the warning signs of the epidemic, which is diabetes. And Donald, I think it's important. A lot of people, what we said in the last segment was 90 million people are pre-diabetic. So that means that the population really needs to know what it is to be diabetic and the warning signs, so they can potentially prevent or stop themselves for going down the road of diabetes.
Right. Matt, when it comes to diabetes type 2, I mean, you just don't wake up one day and you're diagnosed with diabetes. A lot of times, months or even years before that, you're what's called a pre-diabetic. And there are some telltale signs that you may be on the road to being diabetic. One is, and you talked about it earlier in the show, Matt, is being overweight. If you're overweight, you could be more susceptible to getting diabetes. Some telltale signs is you may have chronic fatigue. A lot of times people confuse chronic fatigue syndrome with having a pre-diabetes situation. If you're getting chronic infections, or if you have a slow healing time, if you have a cut or if you have a blister and it seems to take a long time to heal, you may have something going on. You may be pre-diabetic. If you're getting numbness in your fingers and your toes especially, that could be a telltale sign that you're on the road to diabetes or maybe have diabetes. And also, frequent urination. Matt, a lot of times people get this confused with potentially having a enlarged prostate. But frequent urination can also be a telltale sign that you're on the road to diabetes. So those are just some of the telltale signs that we like to have people look for.
Let's talk about this for a moment. Once you become diabetic, the treatment options throughout the United States, because we are essentially controlled by the pharmaceutical companies, or as we like to refer to them, criminal organizations, they don't offer many solutions. The only solution truly is medication. And, I'd like to kind of address that as far as, so if you're diabetic, you go to the doctor, they're going to tell you, here's some meds. Take your meds. They're going to tell you to not exercise. Do not exercise, take your medicine. If that doesn't work, then you go on insulin. If that doesn't work, you're in big trouble. That's the only treatment route that is prescribed from a medical doctor, is meds and insulin. Now, let's talk about the numbers, okay? Because like you said before, whenever there's a big problem, you have to follow the money. There are $200 million every year that's spent on diabetes medication. That number is expected to be 500. I'm sorry, I said million. Billion. 200 billion with a B. Billion with a B spent on diabetes medication every year. That number is expected to increase to $500 billion by the year 2020. $500 billion is what it's supposed to get to. Now, Donald, you're talking about a big business.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies are looking at all these pre-diabetics as money in the bank. And, a lot of times there are multinational companies that are in cahoots with a lot of these big food companies and food industries that is perpetrating this diet on the American public. And I know sometimes it's oversaid, but we have the SAD diet, the standard American diet in this country. And a lot of that is coming from these unrefined sugars and carbohydrates that we're just bombarding ourselves with.
Well, as a nation, we are 100% addicted to sugar. And, like you said, these multinational food companies want us that way. They want us addicted to food. They want us to be fatter. They want us to continue to consume and buy and eat more and gain more weight and eat more and follow this horrendous cycle. So, and we've used this term before, but in many ways, the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry has an unholy alliance, because the better the food industry does, the fatter that you get, the more out of shape you are, the more unhealthy you are, the more money you're going to spend on pharmaceuticals down the road. And let's be very clear about this. The pharmaceutical industry does not want to cure you of diabetes. They want you to have a manageable disease which they can medicate you until the day that you die.
So you can continue to take their drug month after month, year after year, for as many years as possible.
And, the poignant research that we need to look at is the research with children. So there's a reason that kids did not get diabetes before 1990. If you look at what's changed, it's the change in our diet. It's the processed foods. It's the hidden sugars. The FDA has come out and admitted that food companies put substances in their foods to make you addicted, to make you want more. And in many ways, sugar can be as addicting as heroin. So when you look at those factors, we are set up to not only be fat, to not only be unhealthy, we are set up to contract diabetes. And it's a sad state of affairs, but what we're here to discuss is the fact that there are natural solutions. I know coming up, we're going to dedicate an entire segment to what you can do naturally. So have no fear. There are ways to naturally combat diabetes. There are ways to take your life back in your own hands. And there are ways to avoid the pharmaceutical trap that so many companies want to get you in. And let me leave you with this. And Donald, you've said it several times. What is the perception is the FDA is out there to do what? To protect us, right? They're supposed to protect us. Well, let me ask you how well they're protecting us when you have a company like GlaxoSmithKline developed a diabetes drug, passed all of the FDA approvals. That drug killed 6,000 people and hospitalized 30,000. It killed 6,000 people. Okay? Their lawsuit, all that happened was they were sued. They killed 6,000 people. And they were sued for $229 million. They paid their fine, and they moved on.
Well, Matt, let me quote Herbert Lay. He was a former commissioner for the FDA. And, he came out and he was a whistleblower against the FDA. And he said what the FDA is doing and what the public thinks the FDA is doing is like night and day. And until people realize that, we're going to get sicker and sicker, and we're going to be put on more drugs every single time that we go to our doctors. And it's a sad state of affairs.
It really is. Well, coming up after the break, we are going to talk about natural cures. We're going to talk about things you can do naturally to beat diabetes. And we know everyone out there has the potential to release this demon, if you will, and get back on the road to health. So this is Fusion Power Hour, and we'll be back.
Anne-Marie specializes in premier 5-star vendor and craft shows. She also offers event planning for special events of any kind. Anne-Marie's goal is to provide both her vendors and shoppers with an exceptional experience, believing that promotion is the key to any successful event. Anne-Marie has developed personal relationships with her vendors and is constantly being sought by vendors who would like to participate in her popular events, often with wait lists for vendors. Working with Anne-Marie is an enjoyable, stress-free experience. Anne-Marie is a perfectionist and very creative. She is 100% committed to each event from beginning to end and believes that promotion is the key to any successful event. No stone will go unturned as it relates to promotion. For the ultimate in event planning, contact Anne-Marie today at 219-741-0435 or visit anne-marieprince.com. Premier events in Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana are brought to you by Anne-Marie.
All right, and we are back. And this segment is probably my favorite segment of the show because we actually get to talk about the way to naturally treat and beat diabetes. So, Donald, are there any tips you want to give, or do you want me to just kind of jump right into the list of natural ways that we can treat diabetes?
No. Let's jump right into it. We talked about the risk factors already earlier in the show that somebody may be pre-diabetic, but let's talk about the solutions now. So if someone does have diabetes or pre-diabetes, some steps that they can take to turn it around.
Great, and just for our listening audience, whenever we give out advice, you can find more about this advice at fusionpowerhour.com. That's our site. We list a bunch of great daily health information. But any show we have, when we talk about specific cures or specific natural treatments, you'll be able to find that on fusionpowerhour.com. So let me jump right into it. Fig leaves. So studies have shown that patients that consume fig leaves while diabetic need less insulin. Black seed oil. This has actually been considered a super cure for many diseases. You take 1/2 cup of black seeds, 1/2 cup of watercress seeds, and 1/4 cup of pomegranate peel. You mix it together, you powder it, you take 1 teaspoon of that a day, and it's been shown to help with diabetic patients. Fenugreek is something you can take with every meal. Cinnamon actually mimics the insulin response. So when patients are taking cinnamon or consuming cinnamon throughout the day, they need less insulin when they're actually on insulin shots. Grape seed, its suggested amount is 50 milligrams per 50 pounds of body weight. And this offers protection against hyperglycemic conditions, which is essentially being diabetic. Olive oil, again, there are many health benefits to olive oil, but they say 1/4 cup a day, 1/4 cup a day, can help with your diabetic condition. I will note that a full cup has 2,000 calories, so you still have to watch your caloric intake when consuming olive oil. Bitter melon also has insulin-like properties. Vitamin C. Vitamin C has also been shown to normalize sugars. Now, let me say this again. According to the FDA, you cannot treat, cure, or prevent any disease without it actually being a medicine or a drug. However, we're here to say that there are natural remedies that are being used worldwide that help patients every single day. So take a look at that list. Again, go to fusionpowerhour.com. You can read up on how to take those supplements and to enhance your fight against diabetes. Donald, what I want to talk about now is a natural cure that China and Korea, I'll go ahead and quote this, China called it the ideal cure, and in Korea, they're calling it a breakthrough cure. And I know that you had the privilege of interviewing on TV the doctor that created this cure and tested it in Canada. So would you like to shed some light on that?
Sure. And let me just add to what you said. It was the Nanjing Diabetes Association in China that called it the ideal cure, and the Korean Diabetes Association called it a breakthrough cure. And I had the opportunity of interviewing the formulator of this product. His name was Dr. Young Soo Kim. And
off camera, he told me that he was offered over $10 million in cash by one of these major pharmaceutical companies just to take Iliutin off the market. It's really an amazing natural product that has no side effects. The research for this product was done at the McFarlane Diabetes Research Center in Calgary, in Canada.
Wow.
And there were over 700 studies and formula variations conducted over 19 years. Over 70% of type 2 diabetics were able to reduce or totally eliminate prescription drugs, with the advice of their doctor. I'm not sure about its use for diabetics and as type 1 goes, but I think it may help as well. But if you're a type 2 diabetic, I highly suggest you look at the product Iliutin. I'll spell it for you. It's Eleotin. It's available in a tea formula, and it's also available in a capsule formula.
That's very important to note too, because one thing we haven't really touched on, discussed, is the fact that if you're having to take insulin, it's a very intrusive process. You're having to essentially take a needle and inject insulin into your stomach every day. I mean, that's no fun. That's not what you want to be doing, throughout your life. So this is essentially drinking a tea. Is that right? It's an herbal tea?
Yeah, it's an herbal tea that you drink a few times a day, and it's also available in capsule form on the internet. So if people go and just search for Iliutin, they'll find information on there.
Yeah, and we're also going to have it, again, up on fusionpowerhour.com. We'll have a section on Iliutin so they can easily find it, and we'll try to direct you to the best possible sources for it.
We're going to take a minute and hear from our sponsors on the Fusion Power Hour, coming to you on Arena Sports Network. But coming up, we're going to be interviewing Brian Snow, who's the CEO of Arena Sports Network, about his journey from diabetes to health. He's going to be joining us just in a few minutes, so stay tuned.
Want to get your rankings in the truest form? Want to get the best college news without all the fluff? Then tune into Swamp's Collegiate Sports Show. Join Kevin the Swamp Rat Horan as he ranks all the collegiate sports, from football to basketball and baseball to cross country, soccer, and so much more. Don't forget to visit www.kevinhoranrankings.com and sign up for his newsletter buzzing across the country. So if you want the best college news and rankings and see how the pros are outsmarted, tune into Swamp's Collegiate Sports Show. The Swamp Rat ranks them right every Wednesday night at 8 on the Arena Sports Network.
All right, this is Fusion Power Hour, and we are back for our final segment. We've had a great show so far, all about diabetes, some startling stats, and natural cures. And this final segment, we are joined by Brian Snow. Brian is the CEO of the Arena Sports Network, and he wanted to join us today because he has a very personal story about his battle with diabetes and in beating it in a natural way without the use of drugs. Brian, are you with us?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, Brian, can you, in your words, give us your story? First of all, how old were you when you were diagnosed with diabetes?
I was 38.
And how did the diagnosis come about?
Well, 3 years ago, I was covering a baseball tournament, and I started feeling really, really lousy. I was lethargic. I was tired, and I didn't know what was going on, and I was, going to the bathroom a lot. So after, after that weekend was over, I took myself to the hospital, and that's when the diagnosis came down.
And what ran through your mind when you heard the term diabetes?
Two things ran through my mind. First of all, the thoughts of everyone else that it would be stuck with me and that label would be with me for a lifetime. But then the second thought that went through my mind came in the form of a question: how can I beat it and beat it for good?
We've talked a lot this show about the pharmaceutical industry and about how the Big Pharma likes to keep people on medication for extended periods of time, if not forever. There's been document after document produced, kind of showing that's the direction of the pharmaceutical industry. So, when you found out your diagnosis, what was the medical treatment recommended to you versus what you did on your own?
They gave me 2 drugs. They gave me insulin, which I had to take in the form of a shot, and they also gave me metformin, which I had to take in the form of a pill. And within explaining those drugs to me, they told me that I needed to lose weight, which I kind of quickly figured out. And they also told me I needed to change my eating habits. What they did not bother to tell me was one of the biggest factors that led to my fight with diabetes. And it's a factor that, leads to a lot of people being overweight and becoming overweight. And I talked about this on my morning show earlier this week. And that's stress. I didn't realize how much stress I was carrying in dealing with situations and dealing with my broadcast schedule. And until I got diagnosed with diabetes and all those thoughts came to my head, I didn't realize how much stress I had.
I know you brought up the fact that you started to exercise, you started to walk, and you started to become more active, as well as eat better. Now, this, in my opinion, is one of the biggest scams that's out there as far as diabetes and general medicine, and that is a lot of your leading doctors will say to not exercise while you have diabetes. Now, can you explain your experience with exercising and the ultimate goal you've been able to achieve, which is being symptom free? Can you talk about that?
Well, I can tell you right now, the doctors did tell me not to exercise and just change my diet, which is a lie. It's a flat out lie. Once I started moving around, I started feeling a lot better. I started doing some walking, a little bit of weightlifting, and for about 2.5 years, I was consistent in that. I had to wean myself off of fast food, wean myself off of junk food to really help in the process, because I figured those were the main targets food wise that led to my diagnosis. And the more I started doing exercises and the more I started working out and being active, the less I needed my medicine, because they also gave me a drug that deals with high blood pressure as well. And once I started changing my schedule and making a workout schedule and staying committed to it, I no longer needed my meds. I no longer needed to stick myself with insulin. I didn't need the metformin because the weight was coming off naturally. And within those 2 years, I've chopped about 200 pounds.
Wow. That is amazing. And, that leads me to briefly go over a study which I believe I spoke with Donald about, and that was a study that was done actually for performance nutrition, not even for diabetics. But what they discovered was that your insulin response after a workout, even in diabetic patients, is normalized, meaning a diabetic can clear their blood sugar after a workout as well as a non-diabetic person. So
exactly.
how in the world could a doctor say that exercise is bad for you when it's essentially, for that period of time, fixing the disease that someone has?
Well, maybe they want you to just stay on the drugs, Matt.
I think that's the conclusion that we're drawing, right? Is
exercise
is free.
That's what they want you to do. They want you to be dependent on the drugs and not figure out the simple natural solutions. And You know, you guys and I talked about this, like I said earlier in the week on my show. They want you to depend on their drugs and get it in your mind that this is essential for you to control diabetes. And, you know, my favorite comedian was George Carlin, and I learned a lot from him about the words that you say. Everyone around me, when I first got diagnosed and even continuing my battle, which rages on to this day, so I make sure it doesn't come back, everyone around me, mostly everyone, says control diabetes. I say defeat diabetes. And I've always had the mindset that I wasn't going to control my diabetes. I was going to kick it in the rear end and get it out of my system for good.
There you go. Well, Brian, I thank you for being on the show. And Donald, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, you know, for Brian and listening to his story, it seemed like emotional eating led him to being overweight, and being overweight led to diabetes. And and he was able to reverse that through diet and nutrition. And out of all the natural remedies that we discussed, Matt, diabetes type 2 is one of the most easiest diseases to reverse if people just get some knowledge.
Yep.
And that's what I encourage people to do.
Yep. And that leads me again to FusionPowerHour.com. You'll find this show as well as other shows, as well as other natural cures. The natural cures we discussed will be up there. And I'll tell you, it's been a great show. We've uncovered how bad of a problem diabetes is, but we're very grateful we have the opportunity to present some fantastic natural solutions. We had the honor of speaking to Brian Snow and let him tell us about his journey, how he defeated diabetes, and we know that our listeners can do the exact same thing. And this has been Fusion Power Hour, only on the Arena Sports Network, and we look forward to hearing you again next week. Have a great week ahead.
Thanks for listening to the Fusion Power Hour, Real Health Talk. Catch the Fusion Power Hour every Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern, only on the Arena Sports Network.